Very good morning. It's 10:23. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. My guests are here with me. I'm so pleased to be joined by broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn.
Good morning,
Andrew. And broadcaster and author Amy Nickell. Morning, both. Right.
Hello.
OK, Amy, we're going to carry on with the story we were just talking about before the break. This is the sensitivity readers with classic book text and modern text, as Rebecca Reed was saying. Now, is this just modernising or is it sanitising books, do you think?
Well, I think it's just editing the books appropriately in the hopes that they'll continue to be able to sell them. So rather than being inclined to call this Orwellian censorship or some of the other terms I've seen used this morning, it's just giving James Bond in my opinion, rather undeserved pass into 2023.
An undeserved pass into 2023, Andrew Eborn.
Well, I think it is interesting. Charlie and the Quinoa Factory, I love it. It's got to be good. And they've reversed the decision on Roald Dahl, didn't they?
Yeah.
Turned around and said, look, we're going to do the original words. I always say the word is mightier than the sword.
Can we just say for a moment, I don't think GB News took enough credit for that.
What?
In terms of influencing...
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
...of the nation, there was no channel that was making more of a fuss about the ridiculousness of sanitising Roald Dahl than this channel, so I think that's a win.
And not only this channel, it was this show, this very show. We sat here, we talked about these glorious things, Charlie and the Quinoa Factory, and it took the nation to its heart, and we did it. We reversed it.
But is it different because it was children, it was caricatures, it was comedy? Is it different to James
Well,
Bond?
you have a choice, don't you? The language is horrible if you look at some of it, but so's the language in Chaucer's time, in Shakespeare's time, and so on and so forth. What you need to look at is put it in context. Agatha Christie, she had what was it, and then had the N-word in its original title, and they changed it. I think that's right to change that. There are certain things, but they still keep certain words in. The sweet tang of rape you talked about, they're keeping that in.
That's amazing.
And you know, blithering woman, a stubborn disability, they're talking about homosexuality, all of those things are being kept in the edits.
When you look at the things that have actually been taken out in this round of edits, it's really quite understandable. I feel like this story has just piggybacked off the Roald Dahl thing, and actually this is just publicity for books that perhaps no one's really reading anymore.
Is it the fact that James Bond, I think, Amy, the reason this has caught our imagination so much, it is partly because it's coming on the back of the Roald Dahl story, but isn't it also that James Bond is so familiar, not actually as a book character, but as movies? People feel that he is, you know, he is incredibly macho, he is machismo, there's a lot of machismo about him, but then I kind of quite like that. Women don't do well in the books, but they don't do that badly in the modern movies. The women do really badly in the books.
But the films have totally moved with the times, and I think perhaps they just want to hang on to that momentum of James Bond's popularity, and for it to endure, we can't have a book with the N-word littered in it, with some of the depictions of black people that are in these books at the moment. And let's not forget that these aren't history books, these are fiction books. And when a lot of them were written, they were intended to be cheap thrillers that were never intended to stand the test of time. So when people talk about James Bond books being classics, it's not really the case. They were never intended to have this much longevity, but they have. So let's let them move with the times.
And James Bond is a misogynistic character anyway, when you look at all the early depictions in that sort of stuff. What I loved, I wrote down, he said, well, I've warned my publisher that if they later on so much as change a single comma in one of my books, they will never see another word from me, ever. Never, ever, ever.
Who said that? Roald Dahl?
Roald Dahl said that. And he's threatened to send around the enormous crocodile. It used to be fat, but changed to enormous. It used to be the enormous crocodile. If they did that, you've got to also look at this in context. This is about authors' rights. And you're right about sensitivity. What they should do is offer two versions, if they want to. Those who want to have the sanitised version, and I get the offence, and I understand that in the current climate, but keep the original as well.
You've got to keep the originals.
Or let's just celebrate new authors. Because a lot of the time, with Roald Dahl, he completely swamped the market. And when would the books come out? Like in the 60s or 70s?
Yeah,
and it doesn't really give as much children's authors the opportunity to break through, because everybody just is like, well, Roald Dahl, that's what you read to your children. So maybe this could be an opportunity that we look at. I mean, I can't even name for...
David Walliams is suffering the same
David Walliams is equally awful.
Yeah, equally awful. He'll be delighted with that.
I really want a chance to learn about some new modern...
But enjoy the language. I'd say the word is mightier than the sword. Don't blunt that sword.
Right, now, energy bill rises. If you can explain this to me, you are smarter than me, both of you. I understand that the wholesale price of oil and gas is coming down.
Yes.
The government have been subsidising these bills for us.
Yes.
They're going to stop doing so and our bills are going to go up.
Yes.
But how, Andrew, if the profits of the energy companies are also rising? I don't get it. We're having the absolute mickey taken out of us.
And because you're comparing two separate things, and it's to get the language is basically the starting point. They have what's called the energy price cap, which is what energy regulator Ofcom sets as the maximum that suppliers can charge households per unit of energy.
That's right.
And people get confused about it. They say, oh, now that's how the maximum that we do.
I'm confused by my bill.
No.
My bill is deliberately complicated.
And it's terrible on that sort of basis, because they think, well, hang about the maximum you're going to charge. They talk about an average household, and therefore we'll keep all the lights on, we'll keep everything else. We're not going to get charged more than that. That's not right. It's talking about per unit.
Right.
The other thing that again gets confused is this energy price guarantee. And what that basically is, they set the maximum price of gas and electricity and basically compensates energy suppliers for providing these at below costs. So if it's currently, what, £2,500, anything above that for the average household, the government has to pay, so it has to dig into its pockets. What they're threatening to do is to put that minimum up to £3,000, which means that basically people have to pay more. The current situation is obviously with the war in Ukraine, they went through the roof, prices. Prices are now coming down, and these companies are making a lot of money. So I think, do not be surprised if they turn around and say, coming up in a few days' time, they can say, actually, we're not going to put it up to 3,000. We're going to be very generous to you because we're the giving Conservative Party, and that's what we do. We like to look after people. And that will be, they've got the flexibility to do that. So I would not be surprised, as a futurist, that he will turn around and reverse that decision.
Do you understand it, Amy?
To me, it just translates as government prioritise shareholders and profiteering over customers and everyday people. And I think the government is saying all that needs to be said by ending the energy bill support scheme soon, whilst 10% of people have been thrown into fuel poverty over this prioritisation of profiteering. Because, am I not mistaken, the energy companies are making billions in profits. So how do they legitimise that in light of these massive bills?
Well, I think wasn't that the profit from last year?
Yeah,
we had those huge figures recently.
And that's the problem with the media, isn't it? They sort of focus on these
Don't
companies.
blame us.
No,
this is not my fault. I promise you, I might be responsible for a lot of things.
We'll
this
take
is
the
not
credit
my
for
fault.
Roald Dahl. We'll take that. We can also have our shoulders are broad enough and to raise it. But it is understanding. We always talk about unpacking. What I love about this show is that we get beneath the headlines and say, look, what is the statistic? First of all, what does fuel poverty mean? And that basically is when households have to spend at least 10% of their income on energy. That's what it means. And what's going to happen is it's the charity National Energy Action said the changes will be the number of households in fuel poverty will raise from 6.7 million to 8.7 million. And it does mean that the whole thing about heating or eating becomes a real issue for people. It's already an issue for several people. Several more are going to have that sort of basis. In terms of profits, and I've touched on this beforehand, I don't mind people making profits. They're not a charity, these companies, but you can turn around and say, well, OK, should there be this appropriate windfall tax, which is what they've done to help spread that sort of burden. And so you've got to look at that. We've got to incentivise companies to do things, but let's look at market forces. Market forces will give us the flexibility now to be generous in the next few days, and that's what I predict.
OK, right. Thanks, guys. Before we get into that, though, my guests are still here, broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn and broadcaster and author Amy Nickell. Right, we're going to talk a little bit now about a name that we haven't mentioned for a while. Quite happy about that. We've got to mention it today, Matt Hancock.
Hey!
He set up his own TV company after his reality show appearances. What's he going to do? You've got a TV company.
I've got a TV, Octopus TV. Wonderful. His company is called Green Hazel, which he's set up. Because
Green Hazel?
Green Hazel. Does
Why
that sound
called
fun?
it that?
Well, because of his eyes.
Oh, shush.
My goodness.
You are joking.
I'm making it up.
Oh,
But I imagine it could well be because of his eyes. We should ask him.
Be.
Well, the West Suffolk MP, as you know, he came to fame in the reality show, which basically earned him 320
during the pandemic for me.
Well, in terms of
then
reality
he cashed in on his
shows,
fame,
he did. £320,000. And he gave lots to charity. £10,000. £10,000. Slightly sarcastic. Of the 320,000 for appearing in that glorious I'm a Celebrity. And people said, sorry, who's a celebrity? That was a sort of a general question. He also appeared in Channel 4's celebrity SAS Who Dares Wins. So the idea is he's going to do lots more of this sort of stuff. He quite likes this business. And so that's what he thought. He would set up his own production company, his own TV company, to manage his glorious talents. What do you think?
Go on, Amy. I think a lot, but go on.
I mean, he just really, really wants to raise awareness of dyslexia. Remember, it's all about that. No, he wants to be.
He wants to just be
big
famous.
Star, big star, yeah. But what do you think he's got his eye on? Because I'm thinking it's Strictly Come Dancing.
Oh, he can't do another reality show. He can't do another reality show.
Love Island was the joke, wasn't it? The Brit Awards, Mo Gilligan sort of said he could go along. He sort of said, I've had a word with security. Do not worry, Matt Hancock will not be here, but you'll catch him on some show, the comedian said. He'll be on Casamore tomorrow night.
In his jeans and his roll neck, just depending on people having such a short memory.
They have. I mean, you talk about balance, though. The fact is, we've got to remember that he did better than most politicians in I'm a Celebrity. He came third or something, didn't he?
Well, yes, whilst, you know, infuriating the rest of us who thought that, frankly, he had some serious questions to answer about behaviour in the last 3 years. And he still does.
And he's going to answer those questions, because that's all going to happen, apart from in the Pandemic Diaries, which is almost out selling spare. So you've got to look at those sort of things. It's got to also turn around and say, he's popular. Now, a lot of people don't like that, but he came third in a really highly rated TV programme.
I find it incredibly baffling that there's an appetite for him to be on these types of shows and that he could be perceived as popular. And I was listening this morning to a podcast with Bernie Sanders in the US, and I was just comparing the two characters, and that we have these Matt Hancock type figures in our public life who honestly are in politics to fast track them into show business. And I don't think you get that with a serious politician. Like imagine Bernie Sanders doing this. It's ridiculous. It would never happen. But Matt Hancock's just showing us what he is. He only ever wanted approval, validation, and a bit of star.
But you're absolutely right. And in terms of, I always say, P.T. Barnum, if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. From ITV's point of view, they got fantastic ratings as a result of him going in there. And if you have a character that everybody wants to hate, it's like the pantomime villain. It works on that sort of premise. So he will make fortunes from this, whether we like it or not. And we've all got strong views, I know.
And I remember watching the key protagonists of COVID lockdown policy and medical ethics going out of the window and years of understanding of virology just being ignored.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, all these characters who are in this performance are going to ride off into the sunset.
Absolutely.
There'll be no form of recourse, and they will make millions, billions between them out of this and how they've pulled the strings of this particular performance. But, yeah, well, let's see what kind of TV programmes he wants to make. I'm available, Matt Hancock. If you want a little sit-down chat, little interview. Love to have you in any time.
There you go.
I have a few questions. Right, what we're talking about now. Do you want to talk about the thing in your house which is absolutely filthy, if you're lucky enough to have one?
And what would you guess it is to start with?
So, how do you like a hot tub? I like a hot tub, I can't lie. I like a hot tub. Do you like a hot tub, Amy?
Do you know what? I've just got back from a spa break.
OK.
It's my fiancé's birthday over
Nice.
the weekend, so I feel fully acquainted with the hot tub. So it's just lovely that you've brought this story to me.
Well, one in 20 people bought a hot tub at the height of the pandemic. Nobody can afford to turn them on now because the electricity is so blimmin' expensive to heat them up.
Might be the silver lining.
Probably just as well, because what are the details of this, Andrew?
Oh, they're revolting. You're going to put people off their morning croissant with this sort of story. It is horrendous. So Victoria Allen is the science editor for the Daily Mail. She's talked about these hot tubs, and basically they are a grime machine, is what she's saying. They've got horrible germs in there. If I read it out, forgive me. So they're sort of talking, basically people are describing taking a bath as stewing in your own filth, but being in a hot tub is stewing in other people's filth. And they then describe, they've done these little tests about fecal matter.
Yeah, read the menu, Andrew.
It is, I don't want to read the menu.
What's on the jacuzzi menu?
Each jacuzzi has roughly 100 milligrams of fecal matter from the people who've just been in before you. It says they're not quite the luxury they may appear. Apparently, you have to check. Nobody checks their filters. Nobody keeps them clean enough. If they smell really strongly of chlorine, if you go to your local leisure centre or you know the pool, you might be a member of whatever.
That was the worst bit for me.
If it smells of chlorine,
the cleaner it is. But when actually, the more it smells of chlorine, the more sweat is in it, because that's the smell of the chlorine reacting with the
You're right.
in the water.
And this Dr. Freestone gives advice. They say a good way to judge is to wipe your finger along the rim.
And see if it's slimy.
And see if it's slimy with bacteria. I mean, come on.
But they do say that if you have a glass of champagne or an alcoholic drink in the hot tub, it doesn't matter if you get a bit of the jacuzzi in your drink because the alcohol will kill the germs.
That's so helpful.
That's a cocktail I can live without.
Thank you.
Right, so what are we talking about now? This is an interesting one. The age of marriage in this country being raised from 16 to 18.
Yes.
Why, Amy?
Well, I think it's all to do... It's a long time coming, and there's been a lot of research into the prevalence of forced marriage in certain communities in the UK. And there's quite a lot of charities and movements that are saying this needs to be clamped down on. And I think this is good because it's a step, finally, for the government to show that they are serious about tackling violence against women and girls, because this plays a part in it. So now, even with parental consent, a 16 or a 17-year-old cannot get married, and they have to wait till they're 18.
But what an extraordinary sign of our times, Andrew, that we've had to change centuries, decades-old law in this country because there are certain immigrant communities who are abusing that law. And this is forced marriage, particularly.
Yeah, and that was the problem, because so it's the Marriage and Civil Partnership Minimum Age Act, which comes into force today, actually, so it's working on that basis, and it does exactly that. Previously, as you said, 16 and 17-year-olds could marry with parental consent. The problem is turning around and saying, were they being coerced? And actually, that was the difficult proof. So there is absolute prohibition, and the people can basically get up to 7 years in prison if they break that. It's important to point out that it's only in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, they still have the ability to get married at 16 and 17. So, but it's not the romantic notion of going up to Gretna Green and eloping.
Really,
it's really to deal with that sort of forced marriage where people are being coerced, there have been honour killings, and it's addressing that sort of issue. And it's interesting because the UN is pushing for every country to end child marriage by 2030.
Now, I was looking at the numbers of this, Amy, because you think, well, there can't be that many girls who are being forced into marriage in the UK. Well, in 2021, the government's forced marriage unit intervened in 118 cases, including child victims, and courts have issued 3,343 forced marriage protection orders. That's a big problem here.
Yeah, and it's not just it's not just a Sharia law. It's also traveller communities. This is quite prevalent in, and we've been talking about this, and these charities have been working towards this law for the past decade. I would say this has been saying this is why I say it's a long time coming. But yeah, I think that it will be rolled out in the wider UK, hopefully, to protect these young women and girls.
Yeah.
And it's also important when you look at those statistics, those are the ones that we know about. That's where the 3,343 forced marriage protection orders, there are several which haven't necessarily passed the test about coercion, which is why it needs to be addressed.
Absolutely. Right, thank you, guys. We've come... It is 11:24. This is Bev Turner today on GB News. Thank you for joining me. I nearly asked Tom this question, Tom Harwood, when I heard that Rishi Sunak was meeting Ursula von der Leyen in Windsor. I nearly said to Tom, do you think she's going to pop in and see the King? Well, news has just broken. The King will hold an audience with European Commission President von der Leyen later this afternoon at Windsor Castle. A palace spokesperson has said the King is pleased to meet any world leader if they're visiting Britain, and it is the government's advice that he should do so. Let me ask my guests about this. Amy Nickell, is it significant that they're meeting today?
I think it's definitely a step in the right direction for me, and I think King Charles is doing the correct thing there.
Or just sort of cozying up to Europe in a sort of soft let's go back, potentially undo Brexit way?
Maybe not let's go back, but let's have a healthy relationship going forwards.
Well, everybody knows, Andrew, that if you get divorced, it's very unrealistic that you're going to have a healthy relationship with your ex going forward.
But you can try, can't you? We shall always be friends, isn't that what people say?
Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin.
There you go. How friendly are those?
Uncoupling.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. I bet behind closed doors. It's not as lovely as they make it.
It's absolutely right and proper that our king welcomes everybody as appropriate. So I think it's good for future relations. Does it mean we're going back? No, I don't think it does. Will it help relations? Absolutely. It's the right and proper thing to do.
OK, let's see. They'll be talking about building back better, won't they?
They will, absolutely.
Right, police should be given power to charge suspects, says senior officers in England. You are a lawyer, Andrew.
I am.
What is going to be the difference between this and the CPS building a case? This sounds like a really significant story.
It's a significant, but they're asking for it. It's not happening yet.
Right.
This is what they're asking for. And they're saying because of the horrendous time it's taken for people to decide whether or not to carry on with the prosecution. The way it works at the moment is the police get all the evidence, they then send it off to the Crown Prosecution Service, who determine whether or not to proceed with a particular case. So it's an independent prosecution lawyers. They're saying for certain crimes, like domestic abuse, harassment, burglary, robbery, theft, knife crime and violent crimes, they're basically saying they want to make sure that we can do this a lot quicker. So the police are saying we should be able to have the power to make that decision. They also quote in this report, and I always say statistics, lies, damn lies, and statistics. They say in March 2015, 16% of crimes were resolved with a charge and stroke or summons, and now it is 5.6%. And they're blaming that on the slowness and the backlog in the system. And actually, backlogs are really bad for everybody. They're bad for the lawyers, they're bad for the witnesses, they're bad for the victims, but also for those who are accused. The defence want to get on with it because innocent people, if they're accused, want to make sure they have their trial quicker.
But is there a chance, Amy, that innocent people could be charged by the police without seeing if there is the necessary burden of proof that the CPS would otherwise try and establish?
Yeah, for me, this is a total shortcut, and it's at a time when only 5% of crimes are actually solved, which poses the question, is the police really fit for purpose? I would suggest no. And also that tallied with the fact that 1% of serving officers have been investigated for a crime over the past 10 years. Now, in the last 12 years, we've seen cuts to the CPS and also cuts to the numbers of police. So I think that's what's created this perfect storm, this backlog. So actually what we should really try is investing into more police and certainly not more police powers, because I think they've got plenty of powers. It's just that there aren't enough of them to put them into use efficiently.
It's also, am I right, Andrew, saying that this is partly a lockdown backlog because court was effectively suspended for such a long time? This reminds me a little bit, we were talking about the immigration rules, weren't we, and that this amnesty effectively on immigrants, refugees seeking asylum, 95% of them will come from these 5 countries, they will get the green light, and so 12,000 of them or so are going to be allowed to fill in some pieces of paper and go through. I just worry that when we are effectively just clearing inboxes, that we set precedents for the future under the pressure of constraints that aren't necessarily a good thing in the long run.
No, you're absolutely right, and there's got to be a fair reason. Justice has to be done, but make sure it's done swiftly. Make sure it doesn't prejudice that justice.
Right, ChatGPT. Just to be clear, Amy thought this was about an online GP service.
Fingers crossed. That would be great.
Doctor, I'm in trouble.
Right, this has got you written all over it, Andrew Eborn.
It has, and it does every week. And what I say, back to the Futurist, what I say is that we predicted this on this very show.
What you say upsets me every single week, and luckily you say it with a smile on your face.
I do say it with a smile, because I always say information is power, and understanding this revolution, which I've been talking about for a very long time, means that people are empowered to do it. What this story is, ChatGPT is basically AI, artificial intelligence, is doing a lot of jobs that other people can't normally do.
Well, they can do them, they're just having them taken away from them.
But they will be taken away. And if every job that can be automated will be. Elon Musk warned about that. Stephen Hawking said it was basically the greatest opportunity for humanity, but also an existential threat. So what this chap's called is Zach Saidi. Even his name has got AI in the middle, but he's creative director of a creative agency. And he said they're already using ChatGPT to generate text. Front page of today's Times, exam bodies are letting pupils use AI chatbots to write letters.
Why? Essays? Why?
No, because they do already.
My
so
son
in the same way...
My son will like this.
He'd love it.
He really struggles with writing. So.
Which is great. So what's going to happen, they're talking about different skills. In the future, AI is going to do all sorts of things.
So where are the new jobs, though? What jobs is it creating
this is the
to
point.
replace those jobs?
It's leisure time. And so what we're doing is saying, look, this is what's going to happen. Every job that can possibly be automated will be. The creative industries, it's time to write creative copy. The Flintstones, I gave an example. 2018, they pumped in every episode of the Flintstones. It churned out another episode of the Flintstones almost identical to the series. You couldn't tell the difference. It's going to happen. Every industry is going to be affected. What we're doing on this show is empowering people by understanding that.
Yeah, but all you tell us, your only solution is you're going to have more leisure time.
Well, you can look at different industries as well. So what's happening at the moment, the reason they're letting it do this exam body, for example, and it's the IB, the International Baccalaureate, they're letting them do it because firstly, that's what's going to happen in the future. But also, at the moment, the ChatGPT is not perfect.
No, it's not. It's rubbish.
Well, it's not rubbish.
Oh, it's rubbish.
It's not.
It's not. It doesn't
It's the
do...
sort of stuff you might find in a jacuzzi, for example.
No, it doesn't.
It's not that sort of rubbish.
Well, it is.
Hey.
Some of the writing is just awful.
Oh, but
And
that's,
it's
as a
horribly,
first draft, as a first draft, it's okay.
It's not.
It's really, it replicates, it can't innovate.
Well, that's the interesting thing. The way that it works, it will start getting language patterns. If you do try it. It's free to try. Try some at home whilst we look at that sort of basis. Look at what it does for a first draft. And this is why they're saying they can use it for students. Because they turn out, you need to question everything. Look at what it's turned out. Because some of the stuff it gets completely wrong.
But it's horribly, like, vanilla and buttoned up, and it's all politically correct.
Oh, no, it's
all
not. No, it's
horribly
not.
woke. It
Well,
is. It's
well,
communist.
You could probably reprogram it by the sounds of things.
You could get it to write Roald Dahl and James Bond and put more offensive stuff in. You could do all sorts
But
of things.
my point is, it can't, invent anything new.
Oh, it can. Oh, no, that's the difference. And it was basically a long time ago, the imitation game. Remember the imitation game with Turing? He turned around, he's on the back of a £50 note, with the Celebrate... Here, I've got one of those.
See, here's the thing, right? Oh, you pay it. Oh,
No, that's Turing on the back of a £50 note. So he was the guy, Alan Turing, in 1950. He was basically saying... Here we are.
Right, lunch is on you,
No,
Andrew.
it's always on me. Anyway, he was saying that basically when you can fool a human into believing they're dealing with a real person as opposed to a computer, that is, you've won the imitation game. That day is coming, and what we're doing on the show is making sure people are forewarned is forearmed.
Yeah, but you're still not told us what jobs we need to do.
But what opportunities will come of this? What new jobs will
So on the creative industries, I still think we need a human input.
This is the creative industries. The jobs that are at risk are copywriters, journalists,
This is my
bloggers. Us, Amy, that's it, we're done.
What are we going to do?
Still to come, Labour leader Keir Starmer has set out his plan for economic recovery with the outcome to achieve the highest sustained growth in the G7. Our man Liam Halligan was on hand to see what was said. That's all after your morning's news. Amy Nickell, let me just ask you about this. Very easy when you're in opposition, isn't it, to just keep it light. I love the phrase Liam used there, a low wattage speech. That's all you have to give, and you can just sail up to the next election without upsetting anybody.
But aren't we, in many ways, ready for a bit of steady going after the past 12 years, particularly since 2019? I think the country's ready for a nice low wattage and ambience to the government that we haven't had.
Low wattage is the phrase, Andrew, because what Keir Starmer said this morning, and I've no doubt that there will be presenters on GB News for the rest of the day picking it apart in a bit more detail, he doesn't talk about tech or AI in the same way that Rishi Sunak gets positively libidinous when he talks about investing in those industries. You don't see that from Keir Starmer, and it isn't in this particular speech you made this morning.
Yeah, it is interesting. Well, I think you want to show the antithesis, because you can then turn around, it's all about communication. Boris went from the wonderful chap who won 80-seat majority because he used to be the Heineken Prime Minister who could reach parts of the electorate that nobody else could. That's what they used to say about him. He then went to the Marmites where you either love him or hate him. They were basically when you show up the differences. Show up the difference between Rishi. He's not going for his clap lines. It's all the doom loop. And it's very easy, as you say, in opposition to criticise.
Yeah.
What you need to be fair to both sides is drill into the details. They've all got a 5-point plan, haven't they?
And it's basically the same.
Well, that's the point. Growth. You need that from the lettuce. So you work on that sort of bread. You can't get those anymore.
I just love to see one real zinger, like just for Keir Starmer to say something about free childcare or housing or something about rejoining the single market, just something that's going to capture the attention of everybody watching. Rather than
that's what the journalists can do, though, when they sort of turn around and say, well, give us one policy. Because as Liam rightly said, the brilliant Liam standing outside
he's
there,
so good.
you turn around and say, give us some details, tell us about how you're going to do this, what's happening, where's the sort of evidence to go with all these sort of policies and so on and so forth.
OK, moving on. This is a really sad story, Amy. We've seen cases, of course, fairly regularly, not as regularly as you might think, of migrant boats drowning. Now, this one that crashed over the weekend, 59 people drowned off the coast of Italy. What happened?
I think that a story like this just makes you think of that poem, no one puts their child in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. And this is a tragedy, but I think a lot of people saw it coming, particularly in Italy, where Giorgia Meloni's government has reduced the NGO lifeboats that are rescuing the people in these boats. She's clamped down on it, and this is the result. And people were saying, with this policy, something tragic is going to happen. And just this year, Italy has seen an increase in migrants, so up to 13,000, up 5,000 since her tough on immigration party came into power. So I think it shows that you can't address this without addressing the push and the pull. You can't just have these tough policies because they don't work, and this is the result.
Andrew, we presume this is a British-only problem, often when you look at the media, but actually lots of European countries are suffering.
I think it's so important to call it out. As you know, we're always saying, look, do the media watch. Why is that? It's affecting lots of people. And we become desensitised to some of these statistics until you personify it. And you turn around, and this, a baby, newborn baby, was one of the 59 victims. And you look at that, and they're talking about, you know, it's reaching €12,000. Rescuers have reported seeing doctors, lawyers and well-to-do migrants from Syria and Afghanistan leaving Turkey by boat. So you look at this sort of stuff, what's happening on this sort of basis. We need to address it at source. You need to turn around and say, let's stop the people smugglers. Let's work out why this is happening on this sort of basis.
When I saw this story, I wondered, having seen the pictures over the weekend of the people who've been displaced from their homes with the earthquakes in Turkey, I wondered if it was Turkey victims of earthquakes. But actually they weren't. These were people coming from Afghanistan, Syria and Pakistan. One person who was arrested was the suspected people trafficker. Those are the people, of course, that we need to address and bring to justice. Right, moving on. Andrew Eborn, we did talk a little bit about this last week, I think, but this is about the war on meat. Cambridge University students have voted for a completely vegan menu across all catering services after a campaign by Extinction Rebellion offshoot. I'm getting to the point, Andrew, where if I go for a meal at a vegetarian's house, I might take a steak.
Look at you taking a steak in a vegetarian place, absolutely.
You know, there's I'm getting, it's a bit like the war on the motorist, isn't it? It's the war on the meat eater. If I have a vegetarian come to my house, I accommodate their needs. I'm starting to wonder whether we meat eaters need to rebel and arrive with a lamb chop.
I like that, and it's about respect, because as you turn out, I can say some of the best macaroni and cheese I've ever had was a vegan version at...
Oh, that's ridiculous.
No, but I'll take you for mac and cheese.
What sort of blasphemy is this?
No, but it tastes divine. Also, however, it's about respect for both sides. And you don't want to absolutely accommodate vegans. It used to be miserable. A bit of cardboard, a bit of grass. That's what they used to have.
It's what they deserve. It's what they deserve,
The menus now are fantastic, and they're all given those sort of vegan options. But it's about being an option. It's about choice. Give people the choice. You're right to go to your dinner parties with your steaks.
I won't really do it.
She will. I know what she's like.
It's interesting, though, because obviously they were given the choice and they voted to have an exclusively plant-based
not all of them.
diet. No, not all of them, but that is democracy.
Yeah, but this is the thing. How many of those students voted for veganism on the menu because they sat around the lecture theatre and thought meat is a moral issue, like I'm going to be judged if I don't go along with the majority, so it's the tyranny of the minority who will be iron deficient, who won't have enough vitamin D in their bodies, who'll be weak.
It was a secret vote, probably. Beef and lamb, however, have been off the menu since 2016. There already, so it's only bits of chicken. All the chickens are rejoicing.
They're idiots. And they go to Cambridge University, Amy.
Well, no, there's plenty of statistics to suggest that plant-based is not what you suggest. These people aren't going to keel over any second, and they're actually fitter and healthier than meat eaters.
Rubbish!
So a plant-based diet has been shown to slow prostate cancer progression by 52%.
Did you
That's
see?
huge.
Well, that's only one cancer. But did you see Bear Grylls talking about this? So Bear Grylls, adventurer, guy off the telly.
Bear Grylls sounds good, doesn't it?
Bear Grylls, yeah. Grill a nice piece of bear, no. But he was talking about the fact that he went vegan for a while, and he said, I couldn't lift the weights I was lifting, I couldn't do my endurance, and he said, now I have literally almost just meat. He barely eats vegetables anymore. And he said he's stronger, he's fitter.
The human body needs things which you get
Animal
from just meat.
protein.
And so experts will tell you that. However, it is a question of choice. People can make informed decisions. If they want to do it, absolutely, I support that. Let them do it. Let them decide for themselves about their nutritional needs, but don't force any other person to do that sort of side. Accompany Bev with her steaks to these wonderful restaurants with Bear Grylls. We can sort that out.
So you two would be eating off campus, I assume, if
No,
you're at Cambridge
I
University.
I would be making Andrew take me to a very expensive restaurant off campus.
I'll do that.
Where we could eat almost raw steak.
No, I'm going to sneak you in, and you're going to have your raw steak in your handbag. That's what I want.
OK, right, talking of weaklings, gym, sex pests in the gym, Amy. Are you a gym goer?
This makes me laugh because when I was a single gym goer, I used to love meeting blokes in the gym.
Yeah.
It was probably my favourite place to meet new people, to be honest. I have many fond memories.
But this story, well, maybe you are the sex pest. Because this story is about a growing number of women who no longer feel safe at the gym because of persistent staring, inappropriate physical contact and intimidation.
Yeah.
Do you go to the gym, Andrew?
I mean, permanently. As you can tell, I live there with my steak and I watch people in the corner just grilling stuff with Bear. No, I mean, and it's a serious report. And I always question statistics, but something called Ori Gym, the health club, they revealed that 6 in 10 women had been harassed whilst at mixed gyms. And that's obviously horrendous for those concerned.
Yeah.
There is somebody on a TikTok account who has close to 1 million followers, somebody called Barnett.
These TikTok accounts I have seen a lot of.
Yes.
And sometimes I do feel quite sympathetic for the men in the videos.
I do.
Gym creeps, hashtag.
Yeah.
That's what I dispute, whether they are gym creeps or whether they've just been caught sort of staring into space and accidentally got in the line of vision.
And it's a case for defamation. As a lawyer, I'll take them all on.
Yeah.
You work on that sort of basis. It's right to call out the problem, and people want to be able to exercise in safety and so on and so on. And it's not just women. I mean, it's obviously an issue with women, but men as well. You do get people who are assaulted in gyms. It's a serious issue. But in order to do that, you have to address it in a serious way. Lies, damn lies, and statistics, we always say, it sounds a horrendous statistic, but let's address this. They're saying, tell the people at the gym, they'll do something about it. Let's make sure that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Call out genuine predatory behaviour. But otherwise, if you like Amy, then enjoy a little flirt while you're lifting weights. We've nearly come to the end. We did a poll this morning asking you whether you thought we needed sensitivity readers for books. It started with Roald Dahl. It's now gone on to James Bond. In light of these sorts of books being edited, I asked you, are sensitivity edits of old books necessary? And a whopping 97% of you are saying no. Amy Nickell, what do you make of that?
Well, it's another job that I can't have then. ChatGPT stolen, I can't do that.
You'd make an excellent sensitivity reader. You also make an excellent panellist. Thank you both so much, Andrew, as well.
Love to see you.
We've got loads more to come on GB News for the rest of the day, of course. I've come to the end of the show. Coming up next is Mark Longhurst. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10.